Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Peter Weil. If you don't already know me, I'm the director of IESVic. Got to say, first off, it's wonderful to have so many people here. We've got lots of IESVic members. We've got lots of IESVic alumni, some folks from government, and some folks from industry as well. And I'd like to thank everybody who's made the effort to come here, especially those of you who've traveled. Days like today don't go well unless we've got everybody coming here and contributing.
So the idea is this: a bunch of students who are aspiring to enter the energy field. It's a bunch of past students who have entered the field and are now really successful professionals. And IESVic is the point in space and time where people make that transition from one to the other. So why don't we use IESVic again and again to bring those two groups together for communication, dialogue, and hopefully to have a provocative exchange of ideas tending toward the academic, but also having a practical side as well, more of a, what's really happening with people who are in industry and government, etc. This is our third meeting, and by all accounts, the idea is seeming to get some credence. People are coming. So it goes like this. I'll see how quickly I can do this, and if I get some of the numbers wrong, please forgive me, but go to the website, go to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, 5th Assessment Report, published earlier this year, and look for a document called the Summary for Policymakers, and that's all you need to read. 32 pages, you can read it in 52 minutes, because that's how long it took me yesterday. But that combined with a Google project that failed called RE less than C, really profoundly changed my view of what the issues are for climate change this year. And this was on my mind when we started planning this conference in detail. And it goes like this. If you think that the climate change problem, which is all about greenhouse gas emissions and accumulation of carbon dioxide and other gases, other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, is an instantaneous function of time, or an integral equation with a very short tail on it, like some little Markov process type of thing, right, really short, then you can believe that if we get to an energy system that does not entail the emission of carbon, we're good, we're done. So if you believe that, you go to a world which is renewable, you go to a world which is nuclear, you go to a world which is I'm all focused on supply, you do the demand side management, you do your efficiency stuff, great, because then we need less supply, so that's good. But it's basically about making the supply out of clean energy. Right? There's a problem. And the problem is now being recognized and quantified with all the climate models. And that is that the accumulation of all of the emissions since the beginning of time, more or less, it ain't going anywhere. And so we are literally drowning in the garbage that we have emitted over the roughly over the industrialization of our civilization. It's catching up on us. And that's the horrifying conclusion from the latest IPCC assessment. And Adrian, thank you. Where are you? Yeah, okay. I mean, the graph was up there, and there was an RPC 2.6. So what Adrian showed in one of his graphs were all the scenarios for where we're going. We're on this thing called RPC 8, which is kind of like business as usual, with maybe this idea that we get to zero carbon energy. But what all the climate scientists are saying to us, or the modelers are saying to us is, no, we've got to get to this scenario 2.6, which actually says in addition to having a no net carbon energy system, we actually have to find ways to pull some of that emitted carbon out of the atmosphere. That's carbon negative. There's a very simple way of thinking about it. You ever been to a football field after a game? It's a mess. It's full of junk, it's full of cups and all kinds of stuff. Somebody's got to clean it up. Okay? Now ideally, you'd like to have a stadium where people take their garbage with them. But if the stadium isn't clean in the first place, it's still going to be dirty. So it's that simple. So the question is, what time is it? 4 o'clock. What time is it?
4:23.
4:23. What time is it?
Later than you think.
Somebody wanted philosophy.
Clean up.
Ah! Okay. It's time to clean up. One. Taco, what time is it? Okay, so I'd say, what time is it? Interesting, right? Because the first person who asked what time it is today was Michael. And he made the association of the time it takes to develop technology with something that we all accept in a very positive way. We all accept Moore's Law as a very positive thing, right? Every 18 months we double our memory capacity. That's where Moore's Law started from. Having an IT background, I know about that stuff. But interesting, Michael, that you plotted the development of the fusion technology with Moore's Law. And except for the policy issues, as you mentioned, it's looking like, okay? Point being, we have a time problem. The time problem is we've got roughly 100 years to figure things out. We can continue emitting for the next 30 years while we get to zero emission. And we sure as heck better start cleaning up for the 70 years and on after that if we want to stabilize the climate. How much time is it going to take us to develop the clean energy technologies? Similarly, right, these things don't happen instantly. They take time. And the Moore's Law is just this great reminder. That's sort of what got me going on the theme. Other things today have been focused on different time scales. So we talked about, just most recently, immediate benefits that will have knock-on effects for the planet, like instantaneous, by looking at managing what we're doing more effectively. Fantastic near time, and you're also saying they make economic sense. The driver is, it's good for business. Well, that better be the case, and with this near time. How long does it take for policy to emerge and for policy to get, we had some discussions today about policies, and I know as people here, Anna's here, she's developed international standards. You're working on the international standard. We have some experience of that. It takes time. Why do we have international standards? Because it's a big, complicated problem. It takes time. Bob Gifford, if you think about what he was talking about, think about the time constants that he was talking about, right? It takes time to change people. He talked about the ancient brain, right? That's a time statement. And so the theme for me, a lot of the theme in the conference today has been about time. Is this like enough philosophy for you? Are you happy? It's getting there? Okay. Safety, right? In that, yeah, we think we've got technology ready to go. But what happens if Michael says, okay, we're going to run that first reactor on Bowen Island next year? Do you think he's going to get away with that? I don't think so. I think there's going to be a backlash because there's a natural time constant for this social acceptance thing. And that's I think a little bit of what Bob Gifford was getting all about. So the time scales from the immediate, we do some management, we do some offsetting, we do some policy instruments. Time scales slightly longer, we start to think about integration of all of these technical systems together. We start to think about new technology, we start to think about actually scrubbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. I got to tell you that 10 years ago, I might have walked out of the room. I didn't understand. I don't like it. I don't think Adrian particularly loves the idea that, oh goody, there's an opportunity to scrub carbon dioxide. But I'm really glad you're doing it, and I'm really glad that that we're starting to think in those directions about what we can do. But how long is it going to take? And so this is where you start to see the continuity of what everybody in this room is doing, be it policy, be it energy management, be it, just riding your bike, all the way to thinking these big thoughts about the energy system and how are we going to get to be a carbon negative energy system by the year 2100. What time is it? I've got 2 minutes, so we're okay. So final thing about IESVic, this has been a great day for me to see people working on all of these time scales. I think though that it's really important for you all to see the way in which the time scales that you're working on integrate with each other. And there might be something in that in terms of weaving opportunities. To think about the positive association of two activities, whether they're energy management, because those guys are looking very imposing over there, with like the next time scale. When you think about R&D, if all the R&D we did was fusion, the time scale is so long that it would be difficult with the social contract to sell that. Similarly, if all the R&D we did was on energy management, well, it doesn't really address the bigger problems we have. But how do we start to link today's work motivating tomorrow's work? And Olga, I want to say we get IRAP to help fund projects, but that would be a little bit too crass, so I wouldn't say that. But you do know that Olga Karagina is here, right? And she's from NRC IRAP and has been an amazing champion of so many different things that it's just great you're here. And we really appreciate the support that IRAP has given to so many startups that come out of universities. So in time, everybody in this room will be an alumnus of IESVic. I hope. Unless you're not doing very well in the program. And in time, I hope that IESVic is viewed more as a community than an institute. So maybe it could be the Vic. So with that thought in mind, I would suggest that it's time to be a community and go for beer. Thank you.
Though David Scott tells me he doesn't quite know what he's going to say, he's going to share some thoughts on where we are and where we might go from here. So, David Scott.
I was told that I was only supposed to speak quickly, so, but I'll say a few things. One, I want you to go back and imagine that it's the year 1630. And Galileo had said once again that the evidence seemed to show that the earth revolves around the sun, not the sun around the earth. And some asked, can you not think of a new idea? Because he said that for some time. He said, there's lots of other ways to tweak the church. Try to think of a new idea. Well, the observation is that Galileo's story may have been boring, because he'd said it several times, to in those days what the media is, but it did not make it incorrect. And I'm saying that because my view is hydricity, or hydrogen and electricity, two energy currencies, made from sustainable sources as the only long-term solution, may be boring, but it's not incorrect. So let's keep that in mind. I'm going to pick up topics that were covered today. First of all, by Dave Chasen, who was talking about the system. And you know, when we think about modeling a system, we think of long linear programs or whatever. But I think that you really don't need to have big programs. You need to simply think. And I'll give you something that'll annoy you, among other things. When we think of these high efficiency light bulbs, you should think of them very often as a CO2 producer. I say that because in BC, 96% of our electricity is generated by hydraulic. Manitoba is somewhere around the same. Ontario is not that high, but most of it is hydraulic. Quebec is a lot hydraulic. So when you turn out or turn down light bulbs or make them more efficient in the wintertime, you still have to run the furnaces. And the furnaces are overwhelmingly fed by fossil fuels. And so consequently, by putting these high efficiency light bulbs in, you are in fact increasing the CO2 emissions. And I wish sometimes that governments that mandate that, and you can't buy other than a high efficiency bulb in BC. I found that out at Christmas when I went to get a new one, and there were some women really rushing to get the old kind of bulbs because they were going to be taken off the shelf that weekend. I find it amazing. The second thing is I want to talk just for a moment about renewables. What troubles me about renewables is that if you say something is renewable, you set aside thinking. You just say it's good. It's a panacea. And you know, it isn't really a panacea in all cases. Sometimes it is. I remind you how we got on the idea of renewables. It was October 1973, and OPEC introduced an oil embargo, and it was successful. But the media, they're two sophisticated words, oil and embargo, and so they changed that to energy crises. And the conclusion came to be that we were running out of energy. And so therefore we thought, well, if we had renewable energy, you'd never run out because it's always renewable, right? That's how it started. And it's good to keep that in mind because there are a whole set of limitations to renewables, and some were covered off very well today, I thought. But just what do we use renewables for now? We have renewable forest, renewable fresh water, and renewable fish. And guess what? They all have some real problems. So that's a bit of a warning to what will happen or may happen if we just, in a non-thinking way, just say, well, if it's renewable, it's good. And it isn't. It's not that I'm anti-renewable, I'm just pro-rationality, and in particular, pro-numeracy. Adrian, another one of our IESVic graduates that we can be really proud of, and I thought that his talk today was excellent, but he did make a comment that I thought I'd speak to. He said, if we can cap CO2 at 450 parts per million, we'll be safe. Or words to that effect. And I think that that's nonsense, because if you look at what the world has had with CO2 up to now, and by the way, if you want to look in my book, on page 109.
$10 at the door?
$10 at the door, yeah. Of which one goes into my pocket. But anyway, you'll have this all covered off, and you'll see that over the last, let me think, 420,000 years, we've gone through 4 cycles of freezing at the poles, or sweating at the poles. In other words, we've had ice ages and really hot times. And in that time, we never went above 310 parts per million. 450 parts per million is way out of the ballpark. And by the way, I've always been troubled by that, and this very famous, perhaps best known in the US climatologist, James Hansen, I was honored to share the stage with him at the United Nations University in Tokyo. And as we walked off the stage, I said to him, how can you say that if we get to 450 parts per million, we can cap it there and be safe. And then I mentioned what the world had gone through before, and he looked at me and he was quiet for a little while, and he said, because I thought that to speak reality would be too frightening. Okay, that's James Hansen speaking. So that really tells you that the people that really know are not allowed, are afraid, in fact, to say what the real reality is. The fourth thing I wanted to say, and this is in chapter 4 of Smelling Land, is about energy currencies. We need two. We need an electronic currency for information technologies and that sort of thing, and we need a protonic currency for flying airplanes and the rest. Neither of them carry carbon. So if you manufacture hydrogen, which is carbon-free, and you manufacture electricity, which is carbon-free, you can, in fact, run a carbon-free world, because hydrogen can do everything that fossil fuels do now without emitting a drop of CO2, except manufacturing cement, because cement will emit CO2 no matter what you do. And so that's where you can do carbon capture and sequestration. By the way, you have a chance because you have a flue gas with a lot of CO2 in it, and typically you have places close by. It's really hard to carbon capture and sequester from the tailpipe of an airplane at 32,000 feet. You know, one of the things that's interesting about when you say hydrogen is I've had people come back and say, David, that's really good because we'll never run out of water. Well, think about how silly that is, okay? And I only say it because some people will say that to you. You'll never run out of water. We have so much water. Well, of course, it's like electricity. You'll never run out of electrons. Okay, you separate electrons and charge, and when you use it, it comes back to be charge neutrality. With water, you separate it into hydrogen and oxygen. When you use it, it comes back to be water again. And so I only mention that. I mean, I know Jed and others will say, David, why are you possibly mentioning that? But it strikes me, and from the conversations I've had around the table and today, many of us in this room are often startled by what are really funny things that people that you would think should know better don't know better. Chapter 31.
Is there going to be a quiz?
Yes. Talks about nuclear power. And nuclear power, in a way, was the quiet elephant in the room today. My judgment is the only way we can produce enough energy of the different alternatives in a carbon-free way is with nuclear. And it is the cleanest of energy sources. It is the safest of energy sources. This is not to dismiss the things that we talked about today. It's just to say, folks, the reality is, if you're going to get there, you have to use nuke. I could give you the death rates for, well, maybe I will. I've got them here someplace. I think. Yeah, worldwide normalized deaths per terawatt year for electricity. Okay? Coal, 6,400. Natural gas, 1,200. Hydro, 4,000. Nuclear, 31. That's the history, folks. And you might say, well, boy, that's high. It seems high for hydraulic, and it is. But remember that that's worldwide, and there have been a lot of dams break and this sort of thing, where a lot of people died by drowning. The last comment I guess I'd make on that is James Lovelock, which many of you know, who developed the Gaia theory, said that the media's favorite soap opera is nuclear. And I've had that experience with people calling me, and, well, never mind. So chapter 31 is, quote, we've got to be carefully taught. That's after the song, got to be carefully taught. And then the full colon after that is no nukes, K-N-O-W, nukes, okay? So think about that. So the other thing that strikes me about these days is that you really have to get the public involved. And so you test markets by having focus groups. Well, I find it interesting that Henry Ford, when he began to build cars, someone said, "What do you think people want?" It was a market test, and he said, "Faster horses." Okay? So I'm just going to leave it at that. That, by the way, is not in smelling that. Faster horses is just something that I've learned in the last few days. That's what Henry Ford said. It's been wonderful being here. I hope you enjoy the seminars. Thanks very much.